In some of my past videos, we've learned how Warner Bros. Just doesn't give a crap about brand consistency for Hanna-Barbera's IPs. Whether it's putting them in adult revivals with very little substance or respect, making cameos that just straight up insult them rather than embracing their flaws, or using them to pander to a different audience entirely. And despite apparently being a huge minority who thinks this, I think it has done more damage to their IPs than good. And because of this, most of their once famous properties have constantly been stuck in limbo. Sure, Jellystone exists, and Scooby-Doo isn't going anywhere, but who knows if we're ever going to get another new show with Huckleberry Hound or the Jetsons. But then you have cases like the Flintstones. Unlike most of Hanna-Barbera's IPs, I can legitimately understand and even respect why they keep putting that franchise in adult situations, besides trying to pander to nostalgic adults with the mind of a middle schooler. The Flintstones in its early seasons was intended for an adult audience, since it was aired on ABC during prime time. The fact that both a medicine and a cigarette company sponsored the show during its first 2 seasons should be a dead giveaway. Since the days of Hanna-Barbera, there have been many attempts to bring the edginess of the old seasons back into the franchise, with mixed results. The thing about the Flintstones is that despite its initial adult audience, it was still a family-friendly show. Heck, when character designer Ed Benedict was being interviewed on the Flintstones Laserdisc set, he said that he draws characters with wide appeal. He wasn't aware that the show was aimed at adults while designing them, nor did he think it was a kid's show.
It was cartoons. It was a cartoon family to go on television. And to hell with kids. And in a sense, to hell with adults too. It was just we're doing cartoons as far as I was mentally concerned. And anything I'm drawing, kids or adults have nothing to do with it.
And because of this, you can only draw the line somewhere with the Flintstones without being too off-brand to the original show. Sadly, most cartoons aimed at adults nowadays try way too hard to get away with everything just because it's for adults, especially if a famous comedian is involved. I personally prefer more PG to 14 rated cartoons like The Simpsons and Bob's Burgers, as well as shows that are adult only in writing complexity and character depth, like King of the Hill and Fiona and Cake. However, that hasn't stopped many from attempting to revive the Flintstones into a modern adult reboot. In 2011, Seth MacFarlane was going to revive the Flintstones for the Fox network, and was set to premiere in 2013. However, Kevin Reilly, then president of Fox Entertainment, while he liked the pilot script, wasn't completely satisfied with it. So Seth decided to abandon the idea completely rather than restarting it. Judging from the concept art drawn by Andy Clark, the background and set designs look phenomenal and capture the same charm of the original series. Though since one of the pieces includes art of the characters and Seth's art style, it kinda makes me think if the show were to have happened, it likely would have been just another crappy Family Guy clone. Probably would have went something like this.
So, why exactly do you want this separation?
Well, Mr. Stoneberg, in a nutshell, the cat put me outside. I was banging on the door for like 20 minutes shouting, Wilma!
I didn't hear you.
Oh, there's no way you didn't hear me.
I was in the shower.
Oh, she was in the shower.
The elephant's
You
trunk
could have
was
been
on
right
full
on the other
blast.
side of
I
the door
couldn't
and
hear
you
you.
wouldn't have done
And
a damn
besides, you're
thing.
always
All
yelling
you
about
do is
something.
spend my money
How
on
the hell am
expensive
I
clothes
supposed to know
and
when to pay
hairdos.
attention?
But when I want to get my rocks off, you know where to be found, you passive-aggressive bitch.
The most recent revival attempt happened in 2019 when Elizabeth Banks was going to develop a new adult sequel series called Bedrock. It was a collaboration between Fox Entertainment and Warner Bros. Animation. A pilot was ordered, but despite this, in July 2024, Fox chose to pass on the series. It seems like the Flintstones have been struggling for relevance, at least outside of Pebble cereal and multivitamins. Personally, I don't feel like a Family Guy clone or any stereotypical modern adult cartoon would have been the best way to go, at least not what we would have gotten from Fox. And honestly, how could we even modernize a modern Stone Age family in the most fresh way? The Flintstones seem to have a problem where its revivals and reboots are either too kid-friendly or too adult. It's hard for them to find a good balance between the two. But could the Flintstones on the Rocks deliver that genuine Flintstones itch? Probably not, but I'm still gonna watch it anyways. The Flintstones on the Rocks is an interesting case. Not only was it the first Flintstones project to come out of Warner Bros.' current ownership, but it's also the only Flintstones production from Cartoon Network Studios. The movie premiered on Cartoon Network on November 3rd, 2001. It was written by Cindy Morrow, Clayton Mackenzie Morrow, Chris Savino, and David Smith. Smith and Savino also directed the film as well. It was a simple, typical Flintstones marriage crisis episode, just in a longer format. The film attempts to emulate the first 2 seasons of the original show, so it's a little more adult than your average Flintstones episode. Also, Pebbles and Bam Bam are nowhere to be in sight. From what I've heard, it was actually a creative choice from both Chris and David, as they allegedly weren't fans of the 2 characters. So if this movie were canon, it likely would have taken place before the events of Season 3 of the original show, or after the events of the 1993 film, I Yabba Dabba Doo. Oh yeah, the poster art that's on IMDb, it's not from the movie. It's actually from the cover of a 1961 comic book that just happened to have the same name. Coincidence? Maybe. The Flintstones on the Rocks seem to have not done well in viewership, and has since been disowned by both Cartoon Network and Warner Brothers, and the film itself remains unavailable in any official capacity. The only copies that exist are recordings of the original broadcast, as it's not been re-aired since 2001. There is an archive listing on WorthPoint that showed that a screener tape of the film does exist, but that's about it. I've heard a rumor that the movie was banned due to alleged racism, so maybe that could be why it hasn't been re-aired, streamed, or released on Blu-ray, but I digress. I first heard about the movie after Phantom Strider mentioned it in his Top 6 Darkest Hanna-Barbera Episodes video. I wasn't quite into the Flintstones during this time, so I had no interest in watching it until years later. Well, now that I think about it, it was actually last year that I watched it for the first time, and the reason was actually because someone uploaded a recording of the film in much higher quality, so that's the footage I'm going to be using for this video. The only downside is that the footage splices around every 15 to 30 seconds, but I'm sure someone could find a way to undo the splicing by using older uploads. Upon my first initial viewing, it was pretty much what I expected from Chris Savino. Boring, slow-paced, cynical, edgy, and spiteful. However, the reception of the movie is surprisingly mixed. Most who saw it back in the day or in retrospect have mixed to negative feelings on it. However, whenever someone brings up the Flintstones on the Rocks in the comments on either my videos or posts, they all seem to be really positive, which isn't a bad thing. It's perfectly fine to like something that I don't. If anything, hearing that you guys love it just makes me feel really sad because I really wanted to like it. I always loved the Flintstones growing up. I watched reruns on Boomerang whenever I visited family in Texas. I loved the Pebble cereals and their commercials, especially the stop motion ones. I even liked the 1994 live action film with John Goodman. So why can't I not stand this film? What's the reason behind its cult following? And will my opinions on the film change upon rewatching it? Well, let's find out. We start the movie with Fred and Wilma Flintstone, voiced by Jeff Bergman and Tress MacNeille respectively, attending couples therapy. Zelda Rubinstein of Poltergeist fame voices the psychiatrist who makes Fred and Wilma roleplay each other so she could get an idea of what the family household is like in their perspectives, resulting in the most hilarious performances from both Tress MacNeille and Jeff Bergman, especially Tress. Man, I miss her as Babs.
What, Wilma? I'm sorry, Wilma. I just can't hear you, 'cause I'm not listening.
Hello, Betty. Yeah, I can talk as long as I want. I don't pay the bill. Chirp, 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 chirp.
Hang in there, boy. I'll get food in you soon. Oh, hi, Barney. You want to do something stupid today? Hopefully something that gets me hurt.
However, things turned for the worse when Fred calls Wilma possibly the worst thing he could ever say to her.
Wilma Flintstone, a natural redhead?
And that's how the movie starts, Wilma physically attacking Fred, all while a jazzy rendition of the famous Meet the Flintstones theme song plays. If the movie itself isn't any evidence that this ain't your grandma's Flintstones, this opening scene should do the trick. After that whole fiasco, we return to the old quarry where we see a depressed Fred. Also, Barney Rubble, voiced by Kevin Michael Richardson in this, apparently works at the quarry now. I guess Chris and David took some inspiration from the live action films for this, since not only does Barney work at the quarry like in the 1994 film, but both the Flintstones and the Rubbles married on the same day, like in Viva Rock Vegas. Back to the story, Mr. Slade, voiced by original voice actor John Stevenson, calls Fred to come over to his office.
Yes, Mr. Slate, sir, you called?
I know you wanted that promotion, Flintstone, so I'm giving it to Rubble.
Barney?
On the drive home, Barney talks about the promotion Mr. Slate gave him, while Fred is bitter about it.
All this extra money we're gonna make. Things are finally going our way. Yabba dabba dabba!
And if any of you are wondering why Barney's voice sounds so different than usual, it's actually because Kevin Michael Richardson's voice is based on the way Mel Blanc voiced Barney in the original show's first season, where he had a nasally, high-pitched voice. After dropping him off at his house, Fred finally returns back home, to which we get a very long scene of pretty much silence, which goes on for a while. I do, however, admire the scene where Fred and Wilma are eating their dinner. Not so much the ridiculously slow pace, but more so the type of food they eat and the way they eat it. It really captures their characters really well. It makes you tell that Fred likes giant meat and eats like an animal, while Wilma eats a plate of salad and eats it properly. Barney and Betty, Great Lyle, show up to celebrate the anniversaries of both them and the Flintstones. Of course, it doesn't go well, since now Fred and Wilma are blaming each other for forgetting about it. The Rubbles plan on going on vacation to Acapulco and are inviting the Flintstones to come with them. Now, they have already been to Acapulco in the season 4 episode Fred El Terrifico, so this vacation wouldn't be anything new. especially since similar to how the 1994 film borrows elements from Season 3's As Fred's New Boss, Flintstones on the Rocks borrows elements from Fred El Terrifico. So the Flintstones and Rubbles are off on their way to Acapulco, while Dino stays at home.
Whoa, boy, calm down. For a second there, you looked like you thought you were coming with us. I'm expecting you to keep an eye on the house while we're gone. You think your little brain can do that? Good. Well, in a week, so don't do anything stupid.
Walk out the door, you see someone that you know, and they ask you how you are, and you just have to say that you're fine when you're not really fine, but you just can't get into it because they would never understand.
We get a long montage with the car driving along, while some nice music plays in the background. I really like it. It's like a jazzy cover of the Rise and Shine theme. It sort of gives off a nice break before we're sadly back into reality with dealing with this douchebag of a husband. While everyone is asleep, Fred sees another car coming by, where he and this random lady make googly eyes at each other. While a fairly important plot element, it's another one of those scenes from the movie that overstays its welcome. But thankfully, we get to an actual good scene from the film. In Fred's dream sequence, he wins a bowling tournament and dances with the lady he flirted with earlier. It's all entirely in stop motion, done by Screen Novelties, who are best known for making stop motion sequences for many animated shows like Chowder and Flapjack. But most importantly, they were the team responsible for restoring the Rudolph and Santa puppets that were made to advertise and promote Rankin & Bass's Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. Even if I don't enjoy the overall film, I'm a big fan of the stop motion sequence for how wonderful it looks and how it's well animated. It kind of makes me wish there was a stop motion animated Flintstones movie, kind of like those Pebbles commercials from the early 2010s. As much as I want to talk more about this scene, we do have a movie to finish up. So Fred wakes up with everyone wondering what the heck he was fantasizing about. We finally arrived at Acapulco, where Fred makes racist jokes about the Spanish language.
Wilma, the sign's all crazy. The letters, they're all mixed up. It's all jumbled.
It's written in Spanish, Fred.
What do you mean, Spanish?
We're in Acapulco, Fred. It's a Spanish-speaking city. Please, no.
Is this true?
Yep.
Only the Rubbles could have brought us somewhere all backwards.
But little do the family know, a jewel thief shows up in Acapulco and steals a rare necklace from the jewelry store. Meanwhile, the Flintstones and Rubbles are at the hotel. Once again, Fred makes another racist comment about their language.
Gee whiz, Fred. You're speaking Spanish already.
Yes, I am. You see, Barney, in just minutes my superior mind has mastered this backwards language. Observe and learn, Barney. Amigo! The Flintstones and the Rubbles are here. Amigo?
Si, senor.
Barney, if I didn't know any better, I might actually think I was Roxican.
After stealing the necklace, the jewel thief lays low at the hotel. It wasn't until he bumps into Wilma, to which Fred says this.
Hey! Why don't you watch where you're going, Wilma? I am truly sorry. She's been in the way ever since we got here. Let me just get you... Uh-oh. Looks like your bag. Looks just like Wilma's bag. Boy, I'd hate to get those mixed up.
So Fred unintentionally gives the jewel thief the wrong bag, while Wilma has the stolen necklace. This will be important later. So the families are now in their hotel rooms. Wilma admires the view, while Barney mistakes the bidet for a drinking fountain. While I don't necessarily think the overall movie was as funny as it should be, I do love the part where Fred admires the jumping beans Barney bought for him. It's so dumb it's hilarious.
Come on, little guy, jump for Freddy. Gee.
Fred gets annoyed at Barney's antics and kicks him out, and he and Wilma argue some more.
Hello, Freddy.
Wilma!
You like what you see?
Well, if you'd move out from in front of the television, I'd let you know.
You, Fred Flintstone, are an impossible beast.
The next morning, Wilma leaves to see Betty, and Fred's in the shower. The jewel thief breaks into their room to try and find the necklace, to which backfires on him.
Oh, boy, Wilma. This shower is so invigorating. La-da-da. Would you loofah my bag for me? Go on, take it. Ah, a bit to the left. Oh, that's the stuff. Ah, lower. Whoa, too low.
Shortly after, they take a bus to see what Acapulco has to offer. It's mainly a montage of the rebels enjoying themselves while the Flintstones struggle, mostly because of Fred. For some reason, the music that plays during these scenes gives me Wallace and Gromit vibes. While Wilma and Betty are shopping, Fred barges in and ruins everything and humiliates everyone, even beating up the merchant for closing the curtains at his booth. Back to the hotel, Wilma has had enough of Fred's BS. However, this doesn't last long, because as soon as Wilma sees the stolen necklace, she thinks it was a gift from Fred. Fred decides to play along. While the jewel thief was stalking the Flintstones, he discovers that Wilma is wearing the necklace. So now Fred and Wilma's relationship starts to improve, while Barney and Betty start to decline.
Isn't it great to hear Fred and Wilma getting along so well?
Yeah, swell. Barney, you love me, right?
Sure, Betty.
And I love you.
Gee, I sure.
And when two people love each other, they do things to show that love, right?
Right.
So where's my necklace?
Necklace? But Betty, Fred,
I know what Fred did. I'm talking about us.
But Betty.
I just think I deserve a little pampering, too.
But the necklace...
Is that so much to ask?
Betty, you don't understand.
Oh, I understand. Maybe you don't understand me.
But Betty...
Good night.
Tomorrow, the families are now at the pool where Fred and Barney show off their new Speedos.
For your information, these just happen to be the height of international fashion. Come on, Bon, let's go where our tastes can be appreciated.
Bring it up the rear, Fred.
Did we just see what we think we saw?
I think so. Oh my gosh!
The jewel thief, still hot on their tails, decides to finally speak for once, voiced by Jeff Bennett, and pretends to hit on Wilma.
I told you this would happen if you didn't wear sunscreen.
How many times do I have to tell you, Wilma? I am a man. I do not like creams. And I do not wear lotions like a woman.
Barney wore his sunscreen.
Like I said, creams are for women. Now squirt more of that on my neck.
Of course, dear.
Oh, yeah, rub it in.
Oh my gosh, that imagery is just so much. Wilma gets a letter from the jewel thief, who is trying to lure her into swiping the necklace. We also finally know who the name of the jewel thief is, so for the rest of this video, I'll be calling him Xavier. So Wilma leaves to go meet up with Xavier at the party, while Fred's asleep. Meanwhile, Fred, feeling bad for how he treated her, decides to finally attend the party after all. But after seeing Xavier kiss Wilma's hand, Fred now thinks she's cheating on him. Fred decides to finally go talk to the woman he flirted with earlier.
My life as I know it is over. Cheers to a new beginning. Ah, Fred. You know, it is my belief that we are brought into life with a purpose. and it is my realization that my purpose is failure. For the last 25 years, I woke up every morning with the security of love and friendship. And did I appreciate it? Absolutely not. In seconds, I lost everything I cherished. But it wasn't seconds, it was years. I've made every possible wrong decision known to caveman kind, and I have everything to show for it. Nothing. I have nothing.
Similar to Fred's reaction, Wilma sees Fred giving the woman a flower, which makes Wilma believe he's cheating on her. While Xavier is dancing with Wilma, he finally reveals his evil plans.
It's not you I want.
It's the diamond.
My diamond? My husband gave this necklace to me.
It's my diamond. Now give it to me.
I'm getting Fred.
You ain't getting no one.
Fred soon discovers that Wilma's in trouble, and now it's up to him and Barney to get the stolen necklace back. I gotta say, they went all out with the music for this montage. It really captures the stress that these characters are put into in this situation. Wilma gets the diamond while Xavier kidnaps her.
We're gaining on him, Fred. What do we do now?
Barney, take the wheel.
Fred!
I'm going for it.
Really, Fred? What do we do now?
I really don't have anything right now.
So Xavier threatens to throw Wilma inside the volcano until Fred shows up to express his true feelings.
I may be fat, but you are pathetic. You may think that a jewel will make you rich, but you will never know real wealth until you have experienced true love between two people. The love I have for you, Wilma Flintstone, is the kind of love that makes me the richest man alive. Give him the diamond, Wilma.
Oh, Fred.
Oh, Wilma.
Oh, brother.
Why, you...
While Xavier knocks out Fred, Wilma kicks his ass.
Oh, shiitake!
The lady would also show up, arresting Xavier, revealing to be a cop this whole time.
Senor y Senora Flintstone, you are somewhat the heroes around here.
Shucks, Jorge, 'twere nothing.
You are okay in my book, Senor Flintstone.
Pablo, I'm sorry I've been such a jerk to you.
It's okay, Senor Flintstone. Tú eres solamente un turista americano gordo. Por eso espero eso de ti. Buenos noches.
And so the story ends with Fred and Wilma's relationship finally being off the rocks, and Fred finally becomes more or less like himself again. Sadly, the same can't be said for the Rubbles, because apparently bitter marriages are just so funny.
Barn,
Yeah, Betty?
how come you never saved me from any dangerous situations?
Oh, for Pete's sake, Betty. First it's diamonds, now it's daring rescues. What next?
I just want what any decent husband should give his deserving wife.
You think you deserve anything the way you've been acting lately?
And how have I been acting, little man?
Let's not get personal.
Oh, I'll get personal. I'll tell that you're not a natural blonde.
You wouldn't dare.
Oh, I dare, all right.
We end the movie off with Fred and Wilma back into their rooms, turning on the vibrator bed for some good fun. But what happened to Dino, you might ask? Well, the credits feature Dino back at the Flintstones house, deliberately wrecking everything from both inside and outside, all while the classic Rise and Shine theme plays.
No, you don't get to. You don't get to do that.
Oh, really? Because even if I don't like this film, I actually think it was pretty nice that they dedicated this movie to both William Hanna and Hoyt Curtin. After all, this was the first Flintstones project without Bill Hanna's involvement, as he passed away months before the film's release. I also appreciate the dedication to Hoyt Curtin as well. Not only did he pass a year earlier, but so much of his original music from the show were used in this film, along with new renditions of his iconic theme songs. Because of this, it just felt so appropriate to dedicate Curtin, as the Flintstones music wouldn't be as iconic as it is today without him. Okay, have my opinions changed on this film? Yeah, I'd say so. It's definitely got a lot better after showing this to my dad, who shares a lot of the same opinions I have on this film. I overall found this movie to be a mixed bag. It's average at best and below average at worst. Since I'm not particularly a big fan of this movie, I'll go over the positives first. I think the best thing about the Flintstones and the Rocks would be its animation, art style, and voice acting. These three aspects of the film really makes me think that the people working on this film actually do care about the IP they're working with, and overall did a fantastic job in those departments. The movie itself is cel animated, just like the original series, so the backgrounds and the overall look feels very reminiscent of the original series. The character designs have this rough, simplified feel to it, similar to Ed Benedict's artwork, but they even tried to exaggerate details like Wilma and Betty's heads and Fred and Barney's noses. These designs were drawn by a really talented animator and character designer named Craig Kellman. Kellman has had a history in character designing, whether it be the designs from the Powerpuff Girls, Samurai Jack, Madagascar, just to name a few. So if you love the art style of any of these shows or movies, you can pretty much thank Kellman. In the mid to late 90s, Kellman worked at Hanna-Barbera and Cartoon Network, and made various bumpers and promos featuring new takes of their classic characters that were not only stylized, but stayed faithful to the classic designs made famous by Ed Benedict and Dick Bickenbach. Kellman did his own take on the Flintstones, which were not only used in various Cartoon Network bumpers, but were also used on various merchandise, which are still used to this day, albeit rarely. Though it's interesting to point out that the character designs in On the Rocks are slightly different than the ones seen on the 1995 Style Guide. It's more noticeable with Fred. Overall, I just love Craig Kellman's interpretations of the Flintstones for how much style and edge they have. No disrespect towards Iwao Takamoto or Bob Singer, because while I don't mind the softer, more refined look of the characters from projects after the original show, they really lost so much of the flair that made Ed Benedict's artwork so iconic. But Kellman's designs really managed to bring back that classic edge from the original show, while still making it his own style. It's really sad that these designs were never used in future projects. Had the movie done well in viewership, maybe we could have gotten a Cartoon Network produced Flintstone series in the same style. Other artists during and after Craig's time at Hanna-Barbera also used a similar art style to his, most notably Chris Battle, who did the initial character designs for Yabba Dabba Dinosaurs. Fun fact, he was almost involved in the productions of the Flintstones on the Rocks, but sadly didn't do the budget cuts. And I still won't shut up about the stop-motion dream sequence done by Screen Novelties. It has so much style and charm that captures the original show's look perfectly well, and the jazzy music that plays in this scene is so captivating. Again, seeing this makes me wish we got a stop-motion Flintstones movie. And the voice acting in this movie is phenomenal, featuring almost all my favorite voice actors like Tress MacNeille, Jeff Bergman, Kevin Michael Richardson, even bringing back John Stevenson to reprise his role as Mr. Slate. You can tell that the actors had a great time at the recording studio. While I do find the overall script to be somewhat lousy, it could have been so much worse if the actors didn't do such a marvelous performance. I know a lot of people don't really like Richardson's Barney since it's not the more iconic Ed Norton voice we're all used to, but I don't know, I personally think he's a great Barney. Not only am I a bit biased for Kevin Michael Richardson, but I also slightly prefer Barney's voice from the first season, mainly because it sounds more distinct from Yogi Bear's voice, whose voice was also modeled after Ed Norton from The Honeymooners. The film's art style and animation already makes On the Rocks feel very authentic to the original show, but to make things even more authentic is the fact that they used Hoyt Curtin's original scores from the classic series. It was also a great way to pay tribute to the amazing composer, as he sadly passed away a year before the movie's premiere. Joey Altrida and Skip Heller also did a great job with the film's original scores, in addition to their rearrangements. And those are the aspects that make me enjoy this movie the most. However, I don't consider it to be a great film despite my praises. When it comes to movies, whether it's theatrical, made for television, or direct-to-home video, you've got to make sure that the story and writing is strong enough to carry a movie, regardless of its simplicity or complexity. Something that I unfortunately feel the Flintstones and the Rocks mostly fails in. The movie gets a reputation for having more mature themes, mainly in some of the adult humor, and the way the film deals with Fred and Wilma's marriage. I personally found the adult jokes in this film to be pretty passable, despite being a bit more suggestive than the original show. And while I do question a few jokes they put in, I overall didn't think they were that offensively bad or out of place. Though I didn't think a lot of these jokes were necessarily great, nor did they make it a better film. I also just have to complain about how slow this movie is in many of its scenes. Since Chris Savino has a bad reputation for incorporating slow pace and long pauses in a lot of his work, there are many scenes in this film that I feel overstayed their welcome, and just makes you wish that the story could finally progress. And that, ladies and gentlemen, was my best impression of Savino's long pauses. But the biggest thing that ruined On the Rocks for me personally would be the awful characterization of Fred Flintstone. He's the reason this movie is unbearable to watch. This version of Fred Flintstone is one of the rudest, most stubborn, selfish, immature, uncaring husbands I've ever watched. He's always talking Wilma down, and he treats the rebels like garbage. Not that Fred was a saint in the original show or anything, I mean, he's supposed to be rude, stubborn, selfish, and immature. But what made Fred Flintstone a great character and a decent husband was that under his egotistical, selfish side, he does show actual remorse for his actions, and does actually care about his friends and family deep down. Not only that, but Fred's negative traits in the original show are often shown to be more amusing and played for laughs. The original show, including some of its later projects, just had a better balance with dealing with Fred's traits. Yes, I am aware that he is not a saint, he never was nor should he ever be, but he does show genuine care and remorse more often than most people give him credit for. However, in On the Rocks, all the negative traits he has in the original were put to the forefront, without even considering any of his positive traits till near the end. All he does throughout 90% of the film is being a jerk-ass, a jackass, and even a racist. In-universe, his relationship with Wilma is at an all-time low, and his constant lashings at Barney is because he's jealous of the promotion Mr. Slate gave him. And while I do understand why he acted the way he did in this movie, it doesn't excuse Fred for his extremely rotten behavior. The only time that Fred is actually funny in this film is when he's not being rude to Wilma and Barney. Even when Fred's attitude problem starts to get sort of better at the end, especially when he tells Xavier about how Wilma's more valuable to him than any diamond in the world, I still don't think it was quite effective enough to make up for Fred's misdeeds. They should have better emphasized how much she means to him in a way that could have helped better understand Fred more as a character. I also just didn't find most of his racist jokes about Roxicans to be that funny. He keeps calling Spanish a backwards language and treats the Roxicans as if they were inferior to him. I get they were trying to make fun of Fred as if he were some dumb white American who unintentionally acts insensitive to international culture and gets away with it because he's American, but they didn't even try to be creative or clever with it. It just comes off as less amusing and just straight up mean. Now, I understand why they made Fred this way, as the film is supposed to be a more cynical, over-exaggerated take on the original series, but that's my overall gripe with this film. I found it to be way too cynical than it had any right to be. I don't mind a little bit of cynicism or cynical characters if done right. However, when you have a product that seems to rely way too much on its characters being super cynical with little redeeming social values, I just don't quite enjoy it that much as a result. The more negative, cynical tone this movie has, in my opinion, ruined what was otherwise a solid story. As for the way Fred and Wilma's marriage struggle was dealt with in this film, they definitely showed us how much their relationship has hit rock bottom throughout the film, and how it still struggled even when things got a little better. A more severe marital issue involving Fred and Wilma all sounds good on paper, and has room to expand on their dynamic, but due to the film's cynical nature and negative tone, they just didn't do a great job in that department. I think the main issue with the way Fred and Wilma's dynamic was written is how biased the movie is towards Fred. All the worst things about their relationship is all because of Fred and his horrible personality, while Wilma hardly shows anything that justifies Fred's obnoxious behavior. What made the original Flintstones series great was that it showcased the characters in their own perspectives, showing how even well-intentioned people don't always get things right, and that's okay. Most episodes that involve Fred and Wilma's relationship showcase their different perspectives, and how their perspectives on life get in the way of their relationship without feeling forced. At least I can understand what Wilma sees in Fred, and why they really need each other. If On the Rocks stuck closer to that philosophy, it could have been both a fun satire, but also a meaningful take on their marriage without feeling so jarringly bitter. It seems like the movie was trying to satirize the idea of Fred and Wilma as a dysfunctional couple, but in doing so, it lost some of the heart that made the classic series enjoyable. I'm honestly surprised they even made up by the end of this film, though as someone who loves this couple, I'm still glad they did. If Wilma had her own flaws be better acknowledged, whether it's her high expectations, occasional impatience, or even the way she might take Fred for granted, it would have felt more like a real, mutual relationship rather than just Fred being the sole problem. Overall, the downfall in their relationship could have improved a lot if the film had a better balance in showing Fred and Wilma's negative qualities. Again, I feel like this would have better justified Fred's awful behavior if Wilma was no better. I personally don't blame David Smith or the Morrow couple for the way the story was written, as they have been shown to be excellent writers both in the past and present. If anyone deserves the blame for most of On the Rocks' bad qualities, it would probably be Chris Savino, one of the writers and directors of this film. The fact that he was even hired to work on this film in the first place was a definite red flag for me. As someone who absolutely loves Dexter's Laboratory and the Powerpuff Girls, growing up there was just something about the majority of Dexter's 3rd and 4th season, and the Powerpuffs' 5th and 6th season, that didn't sit quite right with me. And while those seasons were just alright, they suffered from being supervised by Savino. There's a reason why his work at Cartoon Network isn't so fondly remembered. His style of writing, whether it's relying on too long of pauses, slow pacing, or even exaggerating a character's worst traits, have in my opinion not only ruined those particular seasons for me, but also ruined the overall reputation of those shows for many. Again, I actually did want to like the Flintstones on the Rocks, I really wanted to. The idea of a Cartoon Network produced Flintstones revival that's slightly more adult than the original series can and should have worked. It had a good story, it had great voice acting, and it was well animated, and it could have helped expand on Fred and Wilma's relationship more closely. But because Savino co-directed the movie, he ended up making a film that was supposed to be a love letter to the franchise into a more cynical, sometimes draggy, spiteful film. That's another reason why I was so disappointed with Spunk Goes' Hanna-Barbera cartoons. A version of Yogi Bear with Ren and Stimpy style humor should have worked since I love both properties, but because John K was behind it and had more creative control, they ended up being too draggy, out of character, and humor that's hit or miss. If Bob Camp were to have done these, not only would the pacing be improved, but the jokes would have been much better executed. And I feel the same way with the Flintstones on the Rocks. I think this film could have been a million, no billion, no trillion, no quadrillion times better if Chris Savino hadn't been involved. I think David Smith could have easily directed it alone. While he would have kept the film's satirical edge, it would have been a more balanced and emotionally satisfying take on Fred and Wilma's struggles. Given his work on the Powerpuff Girls and the Grim Adventures of Billy and Mandy, he seems to understand how to properly mix humor and dark themes while still keeping things entertaining. He would have kept the more adult humor and stylized animation, but with a much stronger, more emotional core. I know some of you might be thinking I'm being way too harsh on Savino, and while I understand where you're coming from, I don't know. Am I really being too harsh on someone who sexually harasses women? Yes, throughout his animation career, he has had a history in sexually harassing women, from sending unwanted advances and messages to creating an overall toxic work environment. This came under fire in 2017 when multiple women accused him of sexual harassment and inappropriate behavior. Shortly after it was made public, he ultimately got fired from his then current job at Nickelodeon, with his original show The Loud House continuing production without him. And even before all this happened, there were a few animators and writers who have mentioned their displeasure in working with Savino for how badly he treated them. We don't really know what truly happened behind the scenes for the Flintstones on the Rocks, so your guesses on how it was like are as good as mine. Overall, the Flintstones on the Rocks is probably one of the most polarizing projects to come out of the Flintstones franchise. While probably far from the worst Flintstones movie since I haven't seen them all, and the fact that it's nowhere near as bad as John Cazes' Hanna-Barbera shorts, I still don't think On the Rocks is all that great. Heck, I'd even argue that Brian Levinson's live-action films were better adaptations despite their own unique flaws. On the Rocks had so much potential. Yeah, the story does borrow a lot from Fred El Terrifico, and yeah, it was a slightly more adult take on the original show's first 2 seasons, but it had a lot of great things going for it when it came to its animation, art style, soundtrack, voice acting, and the discussion on marital issues. And unlike Spunk Goes' Hanna-Barbera shorts, On the Rocks was definitely made by people who actually cared about the IP. I feel like if the film had a much lighter tone, made Fred a little more likable, and had a better balance between Fred and Wilma's marriage struggles, it could have easily been one of the best Flintstones movies for me. In my opinion, it was Chris Savino's direction that ultimately ruined this decent film for me. Would I overall recommend the Flintstones on the Rocks? Maybe. I think it really boils down to what you want to see in a Flintstones movie. On one hand, it's both a faithful adaptation and a love letter to the original series. But on the other hand, Savino's reliance on cynicism over character development put a massive stain on the film's reputation. If you're looking for something that feels like a genuine Flintstones film, On the Rocks might not be exactly for you. But if you want to admire the film's amazing visuals and performances, then you should definitely check it out. I can understand why Warner Bros. And Cartoon Network would rather want you to forget it ever existed. However, I would like to see this film get a re-release on home video, or maybe see if Adult Swim could re-air it on Checkered Past. It's kind of a shame that they didn't include it on any of Warner's current DVD and Blu-ray offerings. As much as I don't like this film, I do think it deserves some sort of re-release. On the bright side, despite On the Rocks' mixed perception and likely poor viewership, the movie thankfully didn't leave too much of a negative impact on the franchise, as we still get new productions with the characters, as well as new merchandise and licensed tie-ins. Not only that, but we're going to be getting a new animated Flintstones movie in the near future, currently titled Meet the Flintstones. According to one of the directors, Todd Wilderman, he shares that the upcoming film will be a mix of silliness and emotion. as well as focusing more on Fred Flintstone while still putting the rest of the gang under the spotlight. Assuming that things go as planned and doesn't get written off, I think Meet the Flintstones could be a fantastic film that stays faithful to the original cartoon while giving us new perspectives and meaningful takes on the characters. So that was my video on the Flintstones and the Rocks. If you've ever seen this film, what did you think of it? Were you one of the initial viewers who saw it back in 2001? Feel free to comment below, but please keep things as civil as you possibly can. Hopefully no Chris Savino stands find this video and attack the viewers. Let's not repeat what happened in my Yogi Bear Spunko video. Till next time everybody, same Bedrock time, same Bedrock channel.